Thanks very much. It's nice to be here, and thanks for turning up to listen to my talk. As Nicholas just mentioned there, we've got Australia's largest graphite deposit sitting up in the Northern Territory. It's a very exciting project, we think. If you put that now into the context of future demand for graphite and also recent restrictions that came out yesterday, you may have seen that China announced export bans for gallium, germanium and antimony into the USA. And they've also announced at the same time more severe restrictions on the export of graphite to the USA as well. So you can see the trade wars are starting to heat up now with these critical minerals, and I think we're at the forefront of that where we are in our project in the Northern Territory. So this is just a summary slide here of what I'll be talking about in the presentation. As we've already mentioned, it's Australia's largest graphite deposit. It's in a great location as well, up near Pine Creek in the Northern Territory, about 2 hours drive south of Darwin. We've got a mineral resource there that's close to surface, it outcrops, it's wide, it's amenable to low-cost open-cut mining. The location is probably one of the important components of this project there, as I mentioned. And we've also recently announced a strategic partnership with our Quinnbrook Infrastructure Partners. They came in with a placement in the company about 4 weeks ago. Their plan is to build a graphite refining plant up in Darwin. We'll supply them with our flake graphite, and they'll produce spherical graphite, which is one of the inputs into EV batteries and storage batteries. So I'll talk more about that Quinnbrook investment now. Quinnbrook aren't well known. They're an Australian-based fund. They're based in Brisbane. They've got offices in the USA and the UK. They've invested more than $5 billion. You can see the numbers there. The total investment packages of up to $48 billion worth of transactional value there into the renewable energy and transitional energy infrastructure around the world. They're a very large fund. They're probably more better known for being the infrastructure partner for the Sun Cable with Grok Ventures. They're working on having a large solar farm in central Northern Territory and supplying power up to Darwin. Well, first stage is Darwin, and ultimately that will go through in an underwater cable to Singapore. They've got some of the early approvals for that, and they're hoping to commence construction in a couple of years. And importantly for us, that goes very close to our mine site as well. So that's an important part of the package with Quinnbrook. And as I mentioned too, that last point on that slide there, they're looking at building a graphite refining plant in Darwin. Obviously, with us producing flake graphite and then producing the downstream product in Darwin, it presents the opportunity to have a nice little graphite industry based in Australia and based in the Northern Territory. That's just some details of the placement we did with them a few weeks ago. They invested about $2.6 million. They're now a 15% cornerstone investor. I think it makes sense for us to work with them. We'll drive each other towards us doing the mine and them doing the refinery. And at the end of the day, as I've already said, we'll have a nice dedicated downstream processing industry based in Australia, produce spherical graphite for battery use. That's the rationale. I sort of touched off on most of those points there. I think it makes sense for us to work with a company like Quinnbrook. If you look at some of our producing and developing peers, the graphite market is a very tough market. I think if you go back to some of your basic economic theory, the barriers to entry into this industry are very, very difficult, given that China is a dominant player in it. I think working with Quinnbrook now to develop an Australian-based industry is probably a wise thing to do. We'll supply them with graphite. They buy it from us. We negotiate a price which is suitable to both parties, and at the end of the day we produce a product which can be made into batteries, which Quinnbrook can then use to install in their infrastructure developments around the world as well. So it's a nice little circle there which separates us from a lot of our peers there with that pricing mechanism. We can work with them for our graphite product. Also important there, we have got a binding offtake signed with Quinnbrook for our flake graphite, and there's also a provision there for them to provide renewable energy from the Sun Cable to our project as well, which is a very important consideration, looking at the ESG credentials for our project and also cost-effective power as well. So back to the resource itself. We're Australia's largest deposit by a fair margin there. That's our peers there in Australia. So it's a big deposit. It's also globally significant. We're sort of in the top 10 there globally, and I'll show you in a few slides there that there is significant upside to grow this deposit. So it's a multi-decade deposit there. It'll be supplying graphite for a long time when it gets into production eventually. There's our location there. As I said, we're about 2.5 hours drive south of Darwin in the Pine Creek area. Pine Creek is an historic gold mining district, so there's lots of infrastructure there for us to work with there. We've got gas pipelines, high voltage power lines, railway lines, sealed highways, accommodation, fuel, all that sort of stuff there at Pine Creek and Catherine and Darwin. So it's a very, very good location to start developing your project. And we're looking forward to working with the local community. They're very supportive of this. The local pastorist is supportive as well. And as I said, there's a long history of mining here, so they recognise the importance of mining to their local economy. The project itself, we started drilling this about a year and a half ago. We sort of announced the discovery in early 2023. That's some of the highlights of the drilling there. We drilled out about a 4 kilometre strike length there and got that resource of nearly 200 million tonnes of 7.3% graphite. That little purple box there is where we just finished our recent drilling program to upgrade some of the inferred resource to indicated, and I'll go through the reason for that a little bit later. But you can see there that the typical of those hits there is they're very broad hits. The mineralisation starts from surface. It's a wide ore body, and if you look at the cross section there, you can see those two green boxes there with those two grades there is the cross section on the next slide. I like to say that's a typical cross section, but obviously I think you may recognise that they're the two higher grade hits there. But you can see the width there. It's about 140 metres true width. It outcrops on surface, and obviously that's very amenable to very cost-effective open cut mining. The average grade of the resource is about 7.3, but there are zones there for about 10 to 12% as well, which can be exploited down the track if we do some mine planning on this eventually. The exploration target, you can see on that slide there, that little blue part at the bottom of that sort of crescent S-shaped bend there. That's the contact zone between sediments and granites. The heat from the granites has cooked up carbon in the shales and cooked it up into graphite. So it's a continuous zone along that contact there. The blue part there at the bottom where the inferred mineral resource is indicated, that shows you the area we drilled last year. The exploration target for the remaining area is, you can see there, between 700 and 1.1 billion tonnes at around 7 to 8% TGC, or total graphitic content or carbon. So it's a big deposit, this. If we drilled it out, we expect to get close to that exploration target. So as I suggested at the start of the talk, this is a multi-decade opportunity here for a mine site to produce a lot of graphite products for many, many decades to come. The metallurgy is the important thing with a graphite deposit. The geology is relatively simple. There's fairly low resource risks in these sorts of deposits, but the risk is all on the downside metallurgy and the marketing. Our initial metallurgy, we've managed to produce a 94% grade concentrate, which is effectively a marketable grade concentrate. So the ore that goes into that averages around 7 or 8%, and it gets concentrated in the fairly traditional flotation circuit. You can see the float cells there, and that concentrates it up to 94%. But now we're actually in the process now of making a bulk sample, excuse me, of around 5 to 10 kilograms of concentrate, and we'll send that to Germany probably early next year, early January, and they'll do some more test work on that to assess the amenability to make spherical graphite. So they'll micronise it, spherionise it, and then purify it. The end product is 99.95% carbon in the battery material, so they'll be working on that, and we hope to get results from that sometime towards the middle of next year. That sort of summarises that there. There's also a summary there in those green boxes of how we envisage this processing to work up there. You can see the first two boxes there. The mining will be a fairly traditional open cut truck and shovel sort of operation. The processing on site will be, again, a fairly typical crush, grind and float circuit there. There's nothing terribly complicated about this. We'll produce a concentrate on site of around 94%. We'll truck that or rail it up to Darwin, and the processing plant there goes through the sequence there to micronise it, which is to shape it all to a similar size. Spherionise it, it shapes the flakes into small spheres, around 10, 15, 20 microns, and then you purify it to 99.95%, and that'll be done at the Darwin facility under Quinbrook's auspices there. So that puts in play a nice downstream processing industry in Australia to produce this very important critical mineral. And now, where does graphite come from and what's it used for? I think every single battery, whether it's in an EV or a storage battery with your solar system at home or things like that, or massive batteries which provide power, like the one in South Australia, they've all got a lot of graphite in them. You can see that pie graph on the right-hand side of the graph there. Every car battery's got around 50 kilograms of graphite in it. So it's an absolutely necessary component of batteries and the energy transition period we're going through now. The demand is, it used to be industrial. In recent years, it's switched over to batteries. So with the increase in use of electric vehicles and battery storage systems, there's an increasing demand for graphite around the world. You can see there, that little graph there just shows you, currently around 50% of the demand is for batteries. That's forecast to increase to 80% in the next 4 or 5 years by 2030. So more and more graphite will be required to go into more and more batteries as they're being produced. So that's what it's used for. I think some of you might go back to a few years ago, coarse flake and jumbo flake was all the rage with graphite. That's more used for industrial usages. Those usages haven't increased much, or the demand hasn't increased much. But the fine flake, which is used in the batteries, and that's what we produce at Leyland, graphite deposit as fine flake, is used for that battery material, and that's the increasing demand for that. So where does it come from? And that little graph there is a graph of various critical minerals. And you can see that big blue line at the bottom. Blue is what comes out of China. Now, China produces around 2/3 of the world's flake graphite, but they produce nearly 100% of the refined graphite which goes into batteries. So they're the dominant player in the graphite industry. And I think out of any of those critical minerals, it's the most concentrated from the mining and the processing in China. So that recent announcement that came out regards the more significant controls on the export of graphite to the US is very, very significant, because right now you can't get graphite or processed graphite from anywhere else. So it's a first shot on the trade wars, is that announcement from China yesterday morning. With that, so this is my Trump slide there. Again, I put this together a couple of days ago. There should be a picture there of Xi Jinping as well, with those announcements that came out yesterday morning. As I've said, this trade war with the critical minerals is just heating up, I think. We expect the graphite price on that slide there, it's at a 8-year low at the moment, but with these export controls coming in from China, you'd expect to see that price kick up, I'd imagine. And people who want to produce batteries outside of China will be looking for other sources of graphite. There's a lot of graphite. If you go back to that graph with the international graphite deposits, a lot of them are in West Africa and places like that. So I think a deposit where we are in Darwin, in a tier 1 location, tier 1 country, I think it'll be very, very attractive to companies who want to buy graphite products to make spherical graphite into their batteries there. So I think you can see the cyclical nature of graphite there, and given the recent announcements, I think you would expect to see a strong upturn in that price in coming months. And obviously that'll impact all of the share price of graphite companies like ourselves. So just a bit of a summary there of what we're doing going forward. You can say there we've got our resource. We announced our mineral resource, our inferred mineral resource earlier this year. We've done some more drilling for a indicator resource, which we'll work on and announce early next year. We've done our first batch of metallurgical test work. We can produce a concentrate. In the next few months, we'll have the proof that we can produce the spherical graphite, purified spherical graphite from the work in Germany. Once we get those two factors together, we'll put together a scoping study just to demonstrate the economic viability of it. And assuming a positive result from that, we'll be going forward with more advanced mining studies and PFS and feasibility studies to start working on monetising this and construction. So there's a lot of work to do with the metallurgy. Once we prove we can produce that spherical graphite, the next step is to do a lot more work to optimise the flotation flow sheet, optimise the work with Quimbrook on their downstream processing in Darwin as well, and we'll do that in parallel with an idea of we're both in production at a similar time for us to provide them with flake graphite and for them to be producing spherical graphite in Darwin. So again, just a summary there, big deposit, globally significant, lots of graphite. We've got a good location there. We're near the port of Darwin for export of any material. We're in Darwin there, which the Middle Arm Development Precinct there for the location of our graphite processing facility, or Quimbrook's graphite processing facility. And I think our partnership with Quimbrook too is very important, because we'll drive each other to construct these facilities as well, and obviously to ensure that we do get that downstream processing of this important mineral in Australia as well. Now that's a bit of a quick snapshot there. We've only been listed for a bit over 2 years. There's only about 73 million shares on issue. They're very tightly held. We've got Australia's largest graphite deposit. We're in partnership with one of the world's larger renewable energy investors as well, funds. Our market cap is only about $13 million. There's trade wars just happening now with the graphite supply and demand. So I think we're very well placed to take advantage of that, and I think our market cap has got a fair bit of growth potential there in coming months and coming years as we develop the project, and the realisation that graphite is one of the most important factors of batteries and renewable energy going forward. So I think watch this space, and thanks for listening, and any questions, please come and see me in the booth next door. Thank you very much.